This is April Nace. I'm here with Jerry Wright at the Radisson Hotel during Glassfest on May 23rd, 2014. And today we're going to talk a little bit about your experience with Corning and specifically Pyrex, if we could. So, what were the different jobs that you did while you worked at Corning?
Okay, I came to Corning. I came to the Glassworks. In old days it was called the Glassworks in October 1958 with Jenny and our son Peter. He was all of 6 months old at the time. And my job was to design products, design new products for CorningWare, which no longer exists, of course. But CorningWare was just had just been launched that summer, and that was going to be the next great big moneymaker for Corning in Consumer Products Division, of course, which does not exist anymore. So I came employed as a designer. Was very happy to come here to Corning. I liked the countryside. My boss was very active with the racing activities at the Glen. And his wife was, well, both of them are long gone now, of course, was very much involved in changing the schools from the rural school system that we had here to what we have now. And that was a tough job. So anyway, I could see I was in good company. It's nice to have that relationship starting off with a company. Some people never get that. Anyway, my job, as I said, was to design new products for CorningWare. And I remember the first, I brought nothing of that along with me because that's not what you're interested in today. And of course, along with the CorningWare were new products or developing old products that we already had on the market that were in Pyrex. And I thought we as a division thought we could make the electrical appliances from Pyrex and CorningWare. So we got into that area right off the bat. And yes, I was able to invent and design what we call an electromagnetic percolator, which is an electric percolator, which after all was a great big market in those days. That's before Mr. Coffee came out with what we know now. So that's another time, another place. We could have done the same thing in Pyrex, but you could make more money with it in CorningWare Pyroceram, which had just been invented not too very recently in those days, and we knew the inventor very well. Pyrex, as I was saying early, I really had to get it later on. Yes, I was involved with reinventing or redesigning certain Pyrex products that were already on the market for new markets. Pyrex in those days in consumer products was a seasonal affair. They would change the product lineup for each season of the year. Spring, fall, winter, and that kind of thing. And we would bring, since we had not maybe control over distributors, but we had a salesman who could go and walk to our distributors. We sold through distributors who would go out and say, hey, this is what we can give you. Would you like it? Would you like that? You know, and I was one of a team of a few people that would ready products to go to market for that season and through that distribution, which is no longer the case, of course. So I spent about 25 years in product development for consumer products, and during that time it was mostly CorningWare, and I ended up that session with what became the glass top stove, which we're all familiar with now because they're all black tops. If you have an electric stove now in your kitchen, it's an invention that started right here in Corning, and I was one of the team of 4 people that brought that to fruition. But it was not Corning's thing to bring it to the market. We tried, we made some introductories, but we sold the whole business to Amana. So that's beside the point here. At that point, there was a reduction in force in that part of the division. And I joined what was called systems analysis, or what was product liability defense. And at that time, mainly because I created an archives here at Corning, consumer products, including the oldest Pyrex there was, that we could find, that I found. I actually found a dog dish on Dave Huber's doorstep up here. He lived up here on the hill at the time, as we did, Ginny and I did. And on his doorstep was a dog feeding dish, which happened to be a pie plate that we brought out, in a Pyrex pie plate, which we brought out in 1915.
Wow.
And they go back further than that. That's as old as you can get. But that's how I picked up stuff. No matter where I could find it, I brought it in. And now, in fact, that dog dish is probably one of the collection of 19 of the earliest Pyrex that the Corning Museum of Glass has, which is in their museum, operation. And that was painfully put together. It took a long time to find all these dishes, almost all of them that were represented in the first catalog, or what you want to call a first flyer, that we sold in Boston. It was first sold in Boston, of course. And that's all in my story that I have on the origin of Pyrex, which I brought along with me, which is something you have to look at later. And but collecting all of those Pyrex dishes is the property of the Corning Museum of Glass. But at the same time, of course, it was just part of this huge collection of Pyrex products, which I had collected from all times and places, that was stored in the basement of the tall building over here in Houghton Park, C building. It was down in that basement, the building next to it, that all this archives was collected. And that was very important to us in the product liability defense area. We were defending, and I spent 12 years there. And our purpose was to defend Corning Glass Works, against incoming lawsuits involving, we were provided defense mechanism for incoming lawsuits. And this is why I was saying, I want to be careful. 20 years ago, I would have been very sensitive about this information being made available to the general public. It's something we have kept very quiet about, and that's why the name of the department was called Systems Analysis. Well, what's that mean? We know systems analysis, that doesn't mean anything. Fine, that's great, that's the way it should be. But somehow the lawsuits found their way in. And it was up to me and another team of people to defend the product, defend the product that was being sued.
What kind of lawsuits did you get?
Pardon?
What kind of lawsuits? What did people sue you for? What
Death
did you
and
sue
injury.
people for? Oh.
Death and injury, absolutely. We had our own department up on the hill, and we know the man who ran that department for patents. No, this is death and injury. This is serious stuff. And it was up to us to decide the nature of the lawsuit. How involved was it going to be? Could we defend it? We usually did. We told them to go away many times. We told the judge, forget this. This is wild and crazy. It's not even our glass. We had to prove, and Dave Huber was very much involved with this, of course, in determining who made the product. Could it be Anchor Hocking? Could it be Fire King? Fire King, Anchor Hocking / the same, that kind of a thing. Was it even, and here we get into the area of what is Pyrex. I don't know what Dave discussed, but he knows full well that we put our name, our Pyrex label on both the borosilicate that had been, shall we say, developed by Sullivan and Littleton.
Right.
Now, in my story on the origin of Pyrex, we know that Sullivan was learning the tricks of the trade and how to improve glasses in Germany. He was over there in Germany getting educated by the people who make Zeiss lenses in Leipzig. I even show a picture of him with his fellow students there in that story there that I brought along with me. So that too is sensitive. It's a borosilicate glass which contains, the compositions are patented, of course, and there was slight variations of that in the patent. And that's what we made mainly here in our old factory here in Corning.
The main plant.
A factory.
Yep.
There was another Pyrex label, Flameware, which was an aluminosilicate glass. We made, well, here again, I can't illustrate it, but it's still very popular. I've got a Pyrex percolator. It's a Flameware percolator. You can put it on my stove, and if you're careful, when you put a ring on your electric stove, you can use it on the electric stove carefully. But it was really designed to use on gas stoves. And we had saucepans with double boilers in those days. They don't even use them anymore. Who needs a double boiler when you got a microwave? Okay. And percolators and a teapot. And in fact, one of the designs of Frederick Carter, that the spouted teapots, he had three different designs that he made, and three different sizes of each teapot. They're collector's items. They're all borosilicate. They were fashioned right here in Corning. The third prominent consumer product, Pyrex, is nothing but tempered soda lime glass that came out of our Charleroi plant in Pennsylvania. Yes, there were many other Pyrexes. Even the largest disc, which of course we have, was called Pyrex. And it really is. It's the fact that it's low expansion, very low expansion. See, the Pyroceram glasses, which were turned out to be white or whatever, were more close to zero. Pyrex never got down to zero. It was between 5 and 15, I would say, shall we say, coefficient of expansion. But all of this business we had to identify and understand and be able to go to court with in my 12 years with what I've called systems analysis, product liability defense. And there was a team of about 10 of us, of which Dave Huber was a part of, that were in that team. Everybody now, well, another person is involved. He's still very much around, and I join him every Thursday night in the Corning Area Community Concert Band. He loves it. He's come back to it. Anyway, he's still one person around who could speak to what we did in this operation, which we keep quiet about. Why do we keep quiet? Because this has actually happened in your library. We've had an attorney who's trying to prosecute us. He's representing the prosecution. Walk into the Corning Museum of Glass and say, I want information on this and this and this and that. That's what they do. They've got to learn what the business is all about, or they won't make it to the courtroom either.
Right.
So here we are trying to defend against that sort of thing. So I, shall we say, I graduated, or I went on retirement, whatever we call that, retirement in late 1994. And of course the Consumer Products Division was sold, was turned down the river to World Kitchens. I also, in the archives, and here it's sad to say, the man who was really interested in what we had in the archives was all of the items that Corning made in Pyrex for other businesses. I'm thinking about headlights for automobiles, the cover glass and the lens itself was Pyrex. It had to be. After all, the business that got us started was nothing but, well, in those days it was prime importance, a signal lantern globe for trains. And when Corning got into it, that was an awfully big business. And to make a globe that would not shatter, this is the story, would not shatter when snow or rain hit it, was supreme importance. We said, in fact, I could take a quote from one of the magazines that Jenny's picked up. We would put ourselves out of business because we weren't selling enough globes after all the railroads got what they needed because they wouldn't break. The only way you could break them was hitting them with something. They were that tough. They were not really Pyrex, but they were called non-expansion. But they're, again, a low expansion was what was required and it had to be tough. And so we say fairly easy to make. I don't know what the operating temperature of the furniture was anymore, but that was critical at one time. If you burned up your furnace, you didn't have any glass. So
that's where the battery jar story
the battery jar was another example. In those days, before the sun was making things electrical, we had a Pyrex battery jar. In fact, I've got a picture over the Pyrex battery jar, and in that, I'll give it all to you.
Okay.
There's a Pyrex mason jar. A Pyrex mason jar, which does not exist around here anymore because it was purloined by a former employee of Corning. Sad to say. I watched it happen. It's too bad. The guy could get more money for it in the antiques market. The Pyrex mason jar. But the battery jar, again, was an example. It was nothing but it was a battery, and with the permanent, it needed a permanent vessel. Put the battery in, the juice and the plate, the plate in, and it would mount these every so often along a railroad. It would send a signal, of course, supply a signal, which to make the railroads work properly, safely. So it's just another example of many, I think, of Pyrex being used on aircraft, military, of course, labware. We had before I left, we had quite a collection of old Corning Pyrex labware.
Does this collection still exist?
Pardon?
Does the collection still exist?
When we sold Consumer Products Division, we sold, and this is all too well known by your people in the library at the museum. My entire collection of labware, of what I'm talking about, in consumer products, old and newer stuff, was given to World Kitchens along with their rights to use Pyrex, the term Pyrex. Well, there it is. They won't give it up. It's too bad because they're not responsible for anything back before a certain date anyway. And I had items in there that are fantastic, but we were developing back here in the 20s and 30s and 40s. Wow.
Like what?
It really, it makes the rest of the glass out in this world look kind of...
What kind of things were you developing?
Glass that was self-heating with a coating on it. You couldn't see the coating, but it heated up by itself.
Wow.
It's turned into truck mirrors, for one thing. But I was developing appliances in Pyrex, and CorningWare. Again, I was there for CorningWare. That allowed us to hire a lot of people and more people and build new furnaces and the whole thing. Up a whole new plant down there in Martinsburg, West Virginia, to make this stuff. That's really why I was here. The Pyrex at that point was incidental. Like I say, we had to bring out a new line every season in Pyrex. That wasn't quite the way in Corningware. It would be nice if we could, and we did, but Pyrex had to have a new line every season. And both is usually blownware, which would be the carafes. Pyrex had what we don't realize, Pyrex had a huge public image out there, and they never thought about it, of course. But when the waitress comes up to you with a coffee bowl, pouring coffee, of course you should make sure she's pouring it over the right shoulder, or whatever, so she's not gonna, that coffee bowl was made from Pyrex. Then the Mexicans learned how to make it. There you go. But there's thousands of them out there. And everybody in America who went into a restaurant and ordered a coffee was getting Pyrex thrown at them. Whether they knew it or not, doesn't matter, as long as they know. And there was troubles there, of course, that involved lawsuits, which Corning had nothing to do with. But it was how the bowl was made, but still, the bowl was Pyrex. They were treating us like people in Corning like, whoa, Pyrex isn't supposed to break. Well, come on now, folks. If you want to hit it, it's glass. I'm sorry. So that's.
We get a lot of questions at the library about Pyrex breaking. And will it break? Does it break?
But it's not borosilicate. People have got to realize this. The people who walk into the library got to know, hey, are you talking about the stuff that we developed? After all, it was really invented in Germany, invented the idea of boron. Boron is expensive. You know, you just don't play with it. But we developed it here in Corning for consumer use and for whatever, as everybody should know.
Right.
Over how many years?
Do you know who invented it? Do you know who invented it? It was said it was invented in Germany.
Sullivan and Littleton. Dr. Sullivan, which is a, you know, if you don't know Dr. Sullivan, by this time, you should, that's your requirement for being employed here in Corning. Dr. Sullivan made this all happen. Dr. Sullivan made this whole thing happen. If it hadn't been for him, you know, using his head, who knows what would have happened here in Corning. And Joe Littleton came in with him from the University of Michigan. This is all in my talk, okay? This is for you people to look at. They're at the library. You've got a tape there also that was taped from me when I gave this talk.
Okay.
It's that simple. There's the history for you right there.
That's great.
And it's, I was going on, but this business of Pyrex breaking, it's not Pyrex. It's tempered soda lime, and anybody can make it. Soda lime is the easiest glass to make. This is soda lime glass, right there. Nothing special about it. Stuff that isn't related to the glass that Stu Ben made or was made by Orforge or those people over there, or even in China. Or India, whatever they're doing, wherever it's, I don't care. So it affects what's happening with these Pyrex dishes. Once you scratch it, it's just like the windshields on cars before they laminated the windshields. They were tempered windshields, and all you got to do is scratch them, and bammo, they're going to break sooner or later, and it's going to be hard when your head goes through there. There's a man who was making pyroceram Corningware in Martinsburg, whose head went through the windshield. He was crazy anyway. So I've had first-hand experience of talking with somebody what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
He was lucky he was in a car that had laminated windshield.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, never mind. We're not here to talk about it. But my last 12 years with Corning
Mm-hmm.
involved, I say, Pyrex. Dave Huber was also, I believe, I don't know whether he mentioned this or not, but also involved in investigating how the space shuttle glass was broken.
Hmm.
Did it implode or explode when
Wow.
it hit? I don't know if he talked about that or not, or whether he had time to get into it. That's another subject.
Right.
That's how deep he got into this.
That's
We were
interesting.
asked by NASA, how did this window break? Could we tell him? I don't know whether if he could tell that. It's not important right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what he did.
That's interesting, though.
Yes, very interesting.
Yeah.
It's not our problem anymore. It's not Corning's problem. What they do down at World Kitchens or
Mm-hmm.
anywhere else in the world, anchor hocking, we could care less.
Mm-hmm.
We've got our own business here. We have our own reasons
Mm-hmm.
for making the glass that we do, and we make doggone sure it's good. It holds
Mhm.
up. It's more than you can say for a lot of stuff. So I'm still front running for Corning, by God. Gorilla Glass, of course, has been around a long time.
Oh, has it?
Gorilla Glass, as we know it now, it appeared many, many years ago. They had a convertible in the Corning Museum of Glass with a rear window. They'd lay the top back and the window would fold up. Glass bends. Wow. Well, yeah. We can make glass disappear in a year's time. It'll actually degrade. I knew the man who invented it.
Wow, that's
It actually
interesting.
degrade. So there's nothing left.
Hmm.
See, Pyrex is basically pretty susceptible to water.
Mm.
I don't know what tombs you might keep it in for a million years. But glasses like boron glass will degrade
Mhm.
when exposed to water over a very, very long
Very
period
long
of
time.
time. Very long. I mean, but it will degrade. But this glass would degrade within a year's time. I watched it happen. He showed me. No, I regret very much that I don't know what Joe Gallo will be able to add to this conversation.
Mhm.
Well, this man was a sales engineer
Mhm.
for Corning in the not for consumer, you see. And it was his job in World War II to take, which included Pyrex parts that we made for military purposes,
Oh, really?
and make sure they were used properly.
Mhm.
Even on, I don't know that the bomb sight that was used, the Norden bomb sight was particularly Pyrex, but it could have been. People don't know what the Norden bomb sight is, but that saved the day for our bombers for being able to drop a bomb without even knowing that it would get there on target.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you had to look right down on top. It was too late then.
Mhm.
Oh boy. No, he's going. It doesn't matter. It's crying over spilled milk. But
Yeah. What were some of your favorite stories about Pyrex? Or your favorite memories about working for Corning?
well, and how it was first brought to market
Mm.
is. I'm responsible for this Pyrex by Corning, a collector's guide, which you have copies
We have a
of over
copy
there.
of, yes.
And it shows on the cover our early flameware, which is labeled Pyrex, flameware,
Mhm.
aluminosilicate, not borosilicate, This is probably a pie plate made here in main plant.
Mm-hmm.
Here is a measuring cup made in Pyrex here in main plant. These dishes here, this dish could have been made in Leaside, Ontario, Canada.
Hmm. I didn't know any Pyrex was made in Canada.
Pyrex is made in England, made
Mhm.
in Germany,
Right,
and made in France.
right.
Way back in the 20s, after World War I.
Mm-hmm.
Here is one of the teapots designed by Fred Carter.
Right.
It took me to prove that he designed them. I found the drawings.
Yeah, yeah, we have
And
the
it
drawings.
just says FJC, and I tried to figure out who's J. He
Mhm.
never gave his middle initial. Was a fun story.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't, since he was dead by then, I found these drawings for all these teapots,
Mm-hmm.
and it said FJC down the lower right-hand corner, and it showed who did the drawing. He didn't do the drawing, but anyway. But this is one of the three styles of teapot,
Mhm.
and they're elegant, made out of boron,
Mm-hmm.
real Pyrex.
I heard that there was only 4 people that could make those teapots, and that when the lead artisan died, they stopped producing them.
That's right. When he died, I think it was involvement. It had to do with the glass making process. He died prematurely, so they couldn't make teapots anymore.
Mm.
So only last. So you're talking about a year and a half's worth of production here. That's
Wow.
all.
Wow.
24 to 26. That's all. But these dishes here again are tempered opal made in Charleroi, Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
They are not Pyrex
Mhm.
per se, but they're labeled Pyrex because they're part of all these lines. Pyrex by
Right.
Corning.
So Pyrex is the brand name, not
Is
the
the brand name.
glass.
And you see, when we turned that over to World Kitchens, they're doing what they want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. They don't make tempered. Opal glass anybody can make now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know enough. I don't care enough about it, you know. But I helped create this. I'm enlisted in his book.
Mm-hmm.
I supplied these dishes for photography. I gave them all the information they wanted to do with publishing this book,
Mm-hmm.
and I supplied it to Susan Tobier Rogove there. The lady underneath, she was really more interested in the employees and what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And their pictures are in here. Over here, the employees that you might still find around who actually work with Pyrex here
Mm-hmm.
in Corning, still alive. That'd be an interesting story.
Right. Do you know anyone that worked with Pyrex that might still be around?
Not who's alive. Nobody's
No.
alive.
Hmm.
Bunch of youngsters. There's a seminar in Glasgow. I'm involved.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Now, did the designs that you did they then go through the test kitchen?
everything we did went to the test kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of favorite stories there, but I'd have to think of them and I'd bore you.
No, I'd love to hear it.
But then, in this case, it wasn't very funny. I was talking about it yesterday to somebody who was a tradesperson working in the test kitchen
Mm-hmm.
and setting up new electrical circuits. And when I went to plug in or wire in one of these new counter that cooks,
Mm-hmm.
these glass top CorningWare top stove. It wasn't CorningWare per se, but that's no longer Pyrex, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But we made, just to backtrack there, General Electric and Corning were trying to get together way back before World War II
Mm-hmm.
on making a glass element that you could put on top of your stove and replace the open cal rod, which people have in their homes right now.
Mm-hmm.
If they haven't replaced them with this black glass,
Mm-hmm.
underneath it is a cal rod. Not anymore. That's pretty clumsy. was a cal rod. That's a commercial term for a coil, electric coil, resistance coil. I watched them being made as a kid out in Illinois. Anyway, so we were trying to get Pyrex, only we wanted to use Pyrex as low expansion as possible. So we would have to use laboratory grade Pyrex, which I say is near zero expansion. That was the critical. And we had Vicor, which people will talk about, oh, that's very fine, but it's $1 million bucks an ounce, for heaven's sake. We had more tricks up our sleeve. Stories.
Well, tell me a few.
Test kitchen. Lucy Malpe, I was pleasure to be able to work with her in her later years at Corning, but she came here in the late 20s and told the bosses, the big honchos, all the men, you know, you expect women to buy this stuff or have it bought for them. After all, it was pretty expensive. And you don't know what you're selling. You don't know what you can do with this stuff. Just because one person said, come on, I'm going to run the course on it. So she's one of the first people, and I make that very prominent, clear in my talk. One of the first home ec people to make a test kitchen of any kind in America.
What was she like?
What was she like?
What was she like?
This is off the record, but she sat behind the wheel of her Pontiac, and she couldn't see over the wheel yet because she sat like this. She drove herself into the creek up here one day. It's terrible. Oh gosh, she didn't. But Lucy Malpe, Dr. Lucy Malpe, doctor, PhD. She employed a kitchen staff and a staff of home economists that would go out to every prominent store in America and Canada who would promote our products with the honesty that you can really do this with this product and we're not kidding you, you know. And they would set up these little lecture demos. In those days before TV, whatever that was unheard of, you know. What's TV? Television. Now, of course, everything is done on television. If you got Neil O'Donnell in here, he'd tell you about it. Because that's what he did. But in those days, she was responsible for honestly promoting the Corning product, Pyrex and or CorningWare, whatever. And we can do this with this product. This is an idea. She put out a cookbook in 1953, I believe. Yeah, which you should have in the library. I'm sure you do.
I'm sure we do.
Sure you do. And recipes that were honestly tested. There's so many. We find out so many recipes out there. Oh, that somebody wrote them down. They never tried them out. She made sure that any recipe that came out of Corning had already been tested. We're not going to put out this phony stuff. The magazines are full of it. They haven't got the way to test it anyway. Somebody went home and did something. Oh, well, big deal. Anyway, that was her job. And she was well respected for it because she outlasted all the males involved in the hierarchy of Corning, consumer products, and whatever. She could speak to the president and say, hey, you do this. You can do this. You're not going to do that. You're not going to say that about that. It doesn't work that way. That was Lucy Malpe.
Yeah.
So
she was well respected in the company?
Yes, she was.
Yeah.
Yes, she was, absolutely. Well, she outlived most of them, I say. She outlived most, you know. She had the integrity. She established the integrity. She was established the integrity of the entire company. really, whether it was cookware or not.
Mhm.
Yep. That's one good story. But I had the fortune. I was fortunate not to be able to work with her.
Mhm.
And something else we did in those days, we had an opinion center
Mhm.
at the Glass Center, the old Glass Center before it was modified.
Mhm.
And we would take products over there, or models of them, which I could make or were made by somebody, of Pyrex or CorningWare or whatever. And we would put them on a counter over there, and there was 2 women at all times, so you couldn't pull a fast one. Well, had to go, do what. And I kept close to one of them for a long, long time. She died recently at the age of 104, or something like that. They ran a primitive punch card
Mhm.
computer system. The punch
It's
card.
old, yeah.
Okay, the punch
Yeah.
card. And in those days, that product, they tested for decoration, and they tested for function.
Mhm.
We used to have function testing done by focus groups in the Elmira area or elsewhere in this state.
Hmm.
You take a model of a product that you were envisioning as going on the market, you had to go out there and check that out in a focus group,
Mhm.
if not an opinion center or both.
Mhm.
And that really, again, added to the integrity of our presentations in the product line.
Right.
We weren't just putting something else out there that got cooked up because it was as seen on TV today. Well, one thing leads to another. But it's interesting. We brought out the first Pyrex based upon, and Jenny and I actually investigated this. Mrs. Rohr, R-O-R-E-R. And here again, that's all well explained in my talk, slide talk,
Mhm.
and everything I'm going to give to you.
Okay.
Who lived in Philadelphia, and she developed a cookbook, and she was the first person to really Pyrex as a good baking medium. And it's because of her experience that got the whole thing off the ground.
Wow.
You have a bunch of guys out there, Oh yeah, look what you can do with it. Come on, wait a minute. This lady, Mrs. Rohr, said, this is what you got to do,
Mhm.
and I've got to approve it. If it works out, okay, fine.
Mhm.
But really, Pyrex really starts, I say, with the lantern globe,
Mhm.
and that story is well known. I actually knew who bought the first lantern globes
Oh yeah. Who
for
did?
the railroad. He ran the Illinois Central. He was in charge of the Illinois Central
Mhm.
lines in Chicago. I knew right where the yards were. I used to use Illinois Central to get to school. She did too. And that's how we got to the Rose Bowl. The band, the Illinois band, when we went to the Rose Bowl back in 1950,
Yeah.
the beginning of the Korean War. Yeah.
Now, before you mentioned that Pyrex was more expensive than Corningware to produce. Why was that?
Pyrex at the time, when we introduced it in Boston, was considered an expensive item.
Mm-hmm.
Women went in there, even though we were speaking to the upper crust, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
They were invited. There was 3 days, and again, that's all explained in that story very carefully.
Okay.
Pyrex was by nature expensive
Mm-hmm.
compared to other products, other tin cans in the market. You can make your pie or cake or bread in a tin pan, right?
Right.
People still do. They love it.
Mm-hmm.
But what the results you got with Pyrex were perhaps better.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like here again, this is Rohr talking.
Mm-hmm.
I'll explain. You could bake your bread in anything. Anybody knows that. In fact, one of my first designs in Pyrex is blownware. This is sort of blown here. Was a carafe I designed way back in the beginning. It was hand blown in an apple wood mold here in a factory.
Wow.
They would send this wood pattern to the pattern shop in a factory. I used to work with them. They made models for me out of mahogany, but they would take apple wood because it had the right consistency, and they would make a 2-part mold, and they would get a gaffer, so we call them, to blow Pyrex glass into this mold, knew how to finish it. You'd come up with a perfect rendition of what it is that you wanted to had designed, and could be tested to put on the market. Something again that you wouldn't find years later, but that in those days that was expected.
Right.
Corning would put their money into that. That was fairly expensive operation to do. To have a handmade sample made, it was easier to make them out of plastic and a blow mold. Never mind.
Why did they use mahogany for the samples?
Mahogany made me a good surface to paint. Again, I was doing this. We lived in a house up here on the hill that we had rented when we first came to Corning. I get we call it a buck, a mahogany buck. If it was we would use for CorningWare models. It doesn't apply to Pyrex here. They would make. They could make these in mahogany, and we did. We ended up a much cheaper way of doing it with a vacuum forming later on. As time went on in those days, we developed a good model shop. We were able to make our own models of just about anything, and or know where it could be made.
Right.
See, I'd been working in Motorola in Chicago before I came here, and we had to make models out there on our own using fiberglass, bandage. We made a lot of models for Pyrex and CorningWare using the kind of bandage you put around your leg after you've broken it or your arm. You can't buy it anymore. It's plaster bandage. You can make a lot of stuff that way. You get the feel of the shape and the size of it and the heft of it.
Right.
It was cheaper than making out of mahogany. It was pretty expensive.
Right.
And the pattern shop was pretty expensive.
What happened to all of those patterns?
Oh, they're less.
They didn't keep them?
No. No, there's, sad to say, there's nothing left of this. I regret that, and I know you people in the museum, have tried to get. I know that the museum, and Jane Spillman knows this, and I've been out there, creating a Pyrex type museum out there in a warehouse out there east of Corning. Where is it? Big Flats.
Big Flats.
Yeah. You're trying to create that, but you can't possibly go back and get the oldest stuff that I know is sitting down there in what used to be, which is sitting where World Kitchens is now in the pressware plant. It's great, huge space with items in there that we developed in CorningWare and Pyrex from the beginning of time.
That's interesting.
You'll never find. It might turn up in that kind of thing might turn up in an antique store somewhere, but you got to know what you're looking for.
Right. Right.
It's too bad. What was why was CorningWare first CorningWare came out was sort of rounded. It was a square round shape, we call it. We call it a squircle. It was based on a Pyrex shape. We were trying to make a line of Pyrex cookware in what became the CorningWare shape a few years later. But it started in Pyrex, in flameware composition. You put directly on the burner. But you couldn't hold a torch up to it. See, the early promotions for CorningWare was the product manager would hold up he would hold up a piece of Corningware and he hit it with a torch, you know. Wow! He didn't want to do that. It did that with Pyrex to promote it too, and we had a lot. In fact, that picture I used in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it on the roof up here of the old main plant. You could do a lot with Pyrex. Amazing, you know, what you could do with it if you knew what you were doing.
Right.
Show how tough it was in exposure to high heat. But again, I stress that these dishes here,
The bowls.
these bowls and that kind of dish,
Mm-hmm.
were made in Charleroi.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't come out of the plant unless when they're coming off hot and they downshock them. They dump them into cold water.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, if they can pass that test,
Right.
wow. And all of our Pyrex had to do that, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was made to do that. The trouble with the tempered lime is that if you scratch the surface or braided it, something, then you had broken, when you were tempering it, were you putting a skin on it?
Mm-hmm.
Corel does that, but they do it with two different glasses.
Right. They make like a sandwich out of the glass. Yeah. Yeah.
Corel's a whole different subject. It's a wonderful subject.
Did you work with Corel too?
Nobody, huh?
Did you work with Corel too?
No. I was busy with the counter that cooks.
Mm-hmm.
But Corel was going to be the big Corel. I know back 20 years ago, it came out in 1970. Really, 68 we were testing Corel, and Ginny and I have dishes that go back before we labeled it, back from 1968, and they're still going strong.
Wow.
You know, you wouldn't know. They look just like the new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's wrong with it. Nothing will ever be wrong with them. It was the best-selling dinnerware in the whole world
Right.
25 years ago. Sure.
Right.
Probably still is. I gave the business to Little Kitchens. Well, again, there is more a matter of where are you going to put your time and talent.
Mm-hmm.
Look what we're doing on a daily basis, coming down from Sullivan Park and being made throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tie up all your businesses. Here again, it has to do with distribution.
Mm-hmm.
What control do you have over distribution?
Mm-hmm.
I no longer have control, that kind of control in consumer products. So, and the big show is in personal communication devices or television.
Right. Right.
When I first came, CorningWare was actually supporting the development of television. I came from Motorola.
Mm-hmm.
I was even the honchos here called me up to their office one afternoon. Tell us would you tell us, Jerry, what were they doing at Motorola before you left? And I could tell them. I was very heavily involved in. They had a flat screen television at Motorola with somebody that I never saw because I was, but they had a flat screen television going out there. That's what we look at today every day.
Mm-hmm.
Flat screen. It's, flat.
Right.
You don't have any tube anymore, which Corning had competition in that field too.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway. Yeah, there's so many stories, and I think it's time.
Okay.
So,
Is any last things you want to say?
well, I say you're going to have. I'm turning over all my personal archives.
Mm-hmm.
I have no need for them.
Well, thank you.
Both the story
Thank you.
on how Pyrex got here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from Germany, starting in Germany, and Sullivan,
Mm-hmm.
and up to 1990, which is really the big years for it were in the 40s to 70s.
Mm-hmm.
After that, say Corningware kind of took over,
Yeah.
and here Corningware is not even being made anymore.
Right.
What you think is Corningware now is made in China, out of ceramic.
And Pyrex is so collectible now.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny's got some really nice old stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But most of it, you can buy duplicates, replicas of it down the street, down here in Market Street.
Mm.
I walked in there the other day. You've got piles of these bowls.
Mm-hmm.
At one time before people got smart, because they could tell how old they were by the thickness of them.
Mm-hmm. Those bowls
We're
are
getting good money.
Yeah,
Well,
they
it's
are.
not worth it.
Yeah.
Unless you want to use them in the kitchen for something, they hold up forever. But if you think you're going to collect that stuff for making any money on it, you're crazy. There's too many of them out there. It's not a rare thing. People, they'll last forever. You know, I don't. Now that teapot by Carter, that's something else.
That would be
But you
collectible.
got to be careful that you don't pick one up like we have over town here, and you see little cracks where the handle was welded, shall we say, to the side of the bowl, and because there was a slight change in expansion there over the years, there's little cracks radiating out of there. You better not use that teapot for a teapot or anything. You just let it sit there, and you can get that from the sun.
Right.
You know. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming in and talking
Okay.
to us today. We appreciate your time. And thank you for donating your materials.
Well, I say I have no use for it. We're trying to get rid of this stuff.